NFL Week 15 was one of the most fun weeks of this season anyway. Some of the most bizarre plays that I think I've ever seen, and some of the most enjoyable big plays that we're going to talk about on today's show as well. Shawn, Week 15, we're in the playoffs, important games in all the fantasy football landscape, no matter what format you're playing in, whether it's best ball, you're into the playoffs, whether it's your own playoffs in your dynasty leagues, or whether it's those season-long leagues. There's just so many different options that you have to be very, very intrigued and interested in this week to see how the scores go. And I did a lot more. You mentioned this in one of the recent shows. There was one week where you did a lot more box score watching to see how the games were going, what was happening. Than some weeks I did a lot this week, obviously, and I think it was worth it because we had some spectacular matchups. And we're just gonna. Well, I want to ask you the question first. What did you think of this week? I thought it was unique, bizarre, all rolled into one, and we're gonna jump right into it. But do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the greatest reality football weeks of all time. It was one of the greatest fantasy football weeks of all time. Just an absolutely insane group of games stretching all the way through the weekend. You get the two games on Saturday where you start out with the Minnesota Vikings coming from 33 points down to beat the Indianapolis Colts. You have a beautiful game ending up in the snow there between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. That lived up to the billing completely. Then you have this frantic slate of games on Sunday. Talk about all of the back and forth. The Las Vegas Raiders blow another 14-point lead. Look like they're going to have some crazy stats. I believe falling to 2-5 in games in which they led by 13 points or more. Imagine that. Games in which you led by 13 points or more, you're 2-5. Obviously, that's not how the game ended, as they have a crazy finish there. We have the Cincinnati Bengals, who the Bengals come out about once a month, if not more, and look like they didn't sleep the night before. I mean, they look like,
us don't know how to play football.
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of our college tennis matches back many, many years ago, like driving around all night before the match the next day. Then having to drive 6 hours to the match, then each time you get to the match and you're like, where are we? That's where the Cincinnati Bengals always seem like when they come out, get down 17-0, but then Colm, they are not only leading that game not that long after, they're down 17-0 with like 45 seconds left in the first half. They're ahead by the end of the third quarter. They score 34 unanswered points. Obviously, we've got a lot of talk about in the Detroit Lions New York Jets game, especially with the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins losing. The fact that the Jets came out and tried to tank this game, almost still won, but try and tank this game by starting Zach Wilson. I think that's a question they're going to have to live with for a long, long time. But that game was fantastic. A few games that maybe not so great. You have Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns. You have Denver, Arizona, where I seriously thought there was a possibility that everyone on both sides is going to get fired at halftime. But then they come out and actually play a pretty entertaining second half. So we have that going for us as well. Colm, before we get too far into it, I'm absolutely wired here, having done 12, 13 consecutive hours of football after spending, a huge chunk of yesterday with football and other sports. And I mean, is overtime too a team of destiny? Can we run the magic back? We profiled the listener leagues recently, congratulated the winners there. We managed to advance in one of the two Superflex leagues, and Colm, that team has put up 191 points with Christian Watson still to potentially add a few more points on for us. We have Jalen Hurts with 35, Jerick McKinnon with 34, Derrick Henry with 26, Justin Jefferson 30, Davonta Smith 17, Noah Fant, Colm. Noah Fant decides to play this week. He scores almost 17 points, outscores actually Gino, who's in there in the Superflex spot. T. Higgins adds 16. Drake London, 13 points on the bench. Trey McBride, 11 points on the bench. Those two guys decide and come to play this week. We are currently in the top two spots. It'll be very exciting to advance. Colin, you mentioned the scoreboard watching. This was just, again, a crazy week. FFPC Main Event, the team I had with Ben. So fun to watch Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown do those types of things. We'll talk about that in a second. All of these RotoViz Triflex Dynasty Leagues were in the playoffs. And then you and I did a gauntlet draft the other day. And Colm, I have to say that really sucked me in. I've done like 6 or 7 more since then. Anybody who maybe your day didn't go as well, or like you can't sleep because your team did so amazingly this weekend, head on over to Underdog, listen to the show, figure out the strategy, head on over to Underdog, draft some gauntlet teams. But Colm, this was a great day for Best Ball Mania 3 watching as well, trying to get your teams into the semifinals of that tournament. And we got points. I mean, I think that's the thing we wanted all season long. Win or lose, you have some shootouts. And so, I mean, if you scored 160, 170, 180, 190, you're probably looking at this and say, well, I mean, any other week this season, I would have actually gapped my opponents. As it is, I'm just hanging in there. But we got points. And this is what fantasy football is supposed to be about. This was an absolutely fantastic week.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was doing the scoreboard watching, when I was looking through some of those games throughout the day, I was looking at some of my best ball rosters to see how things were looking. And you mentioned there, like, there's some teams this week with 150, and you're like, I wonder, that team probably has a chance of, advancing in the top 2. And then you look and you're like, oh, there's, 2 teams, 40 points ahead of me. I have no chance here. So the points were being put up in a major way. You mentioned the games on Saturday, which was fun. And when you get those games together, you're always hoping in your head, you're thinking this is going to be fantastic, these high scoring games. We had the concerns, obviously, with the snow. There was reports all day about how that game would go with Buffalo. Didn't really affect the game all that much. And we got all the, a lot of the stars, and maybe not all of them, but putting up those points. But the game, watching the Vikings and the Colts, and I've said I've thought the Vikings have been like a paper tiger all season long. And halftime in this one, Shawn, I'm like, yeah, it's all finally coming exactly how I thought it was going to happen. And yeah, they come back and win that game, and an absolutely amazing game. We get lots of star players having big games there, from Jefferson to Dalvin Cook, even Kirk Cousins getting in the act. But just a fun weekend overall. And we're going to start with one of the games that I thought was very interesting, a lot of fun, and that is the Eagles and the Bears. 25-20, not huge points put up in terms of actual NFL points, just the 45 in this one. But the Eagles now 13-1, but Jalen Hurts, no passing touchdowns, but 315 passing yards, 2 interceptions, which he hadn't really been turning the ball over, but he has 61 rushing yards on 17 attempts and 3 rushing touchdowns. So a lot of the teams, Shawn, you mentioned there, our team in the Superflex tournament, your team with Ben in the main event, Jalen Hurts teams, and they look very, very enthused, obviously, with what he's able to do. A rushing touchdown in this game, which I just thought was an awesome play design, but the Bears blitz, and he just runs through the line of scrimmage, quarterback rush all the way to the end zone at hyper speed. So some fun plays. The concentration of targets in this offense, we'll see what happens now with Dallas Goedert probably coming back into the mix over the next couple of weeks. But with them being 13-1 now, probably makes sense for them not to actually rush him back in this scenario with how they are playing at the moment. But 16 targets for A.J. Brown, 9 receptions, 181 yards for him. We get Davonta Smith, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 126 yards. A 45-yard long for Smith, and then A.J. Brown getting a 68-yard long in this one. Usually when you're getting those really long passes, half the length of the field, you're probably getting into the end zone. But that was the one thing they just weren't able to do in the passing game today, was getting the end zone. But the next highest targets was Quez Watkins with 6 targets. But in terms of the next highest receiving yards after Davonta Smith was 9 for Kenneth Gainwell. So they have a situation where there's pretty much no passing yards outside of those 2 guys. And it's great to see from our perspective to see the concentration going that way. Justin Fields, on the other hand, 152 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns for him. He gets 95 yards on the ground on 15 carries. Left the game briefly, but did come back in. He looked like on the ground, Shawn. These are with Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson hasn't really done it this season, but the 2 most probably electric rushing quarterbacks. And in terms of all time, they're probably, I think they're both probably in the top 10 of all time rushing quarterbacks to watch play. But this was fun to see how both these teams were doing it, and the Eagles do edge out the win here. Yeah,
I mean, you say top 10. I think that outside of Michael Vick, there's not really another guy who would be
with the speed for sure. Yeah,
and Lamar Jackson is kind of crazy because he's almost this downhill type of runner where he gets to the edge, but everything feels like angles and speed and sort of deceptive size. Justin Fields is a cartoon character, right? I mean, he's a player in a video game. What he's able to do, and it's too bad he didn't get actually a touchdown on his long run.
Yeah, that was
this one. He
awesome.
barely steps out. I mean, they called the touchdown originally, overturned and properly so, but that's one where he should have been sacked. Reverses field multiple times, shows the long speed, breaks some tackles, tiptoes down the sidelines. A little bit like the situation with Deebo Samuel last season. You're thinking it can't keep happening. It can't keep happening. And obviously he's going to go through some stretches in his NFL career where it doesn't happen. I mean, you're not going to rush for almost 100 yards a game as a quarterback, through your entire career. He's going to hit some droughts at some point, but what he's doing right now is just absolutely astonishing. And he passes the ball well in this game too. And part of that is just the pressure that he puts on the defense in so many ways. Now, the flip side of it, 6 more sacks, and those negative plays are really hurting the offense. And yet you look at what he's passing to here. Byron Pringle leads the team with 39 receiving yards. He gets the touchdown late on sort of a broken play. David Montgomery, receiving touchdown, 3 targets, 38 yards. You have Cole Kmet leads the team with 5 targets. It's just an absolute joke here. One of the plays that they don't convert is a 4th down where Dante Pettis maybe makes the least effort I've ever seen any NFL player make on a meaningful play. Right? It's just kind of mind-boggling. I mean, if you want to know why Dante Pettis, someone who's very athletic, was not actually good in college and was a really bizarre draft pick by the 49ers, and then quickly fell out of favor with the 49ers because the 49ers make all these bad picks, and then they see the guys in practice, and they're like, no, we're not going to play you. We give playing time based on performance. And you're like, well, I mean, you should pick people who were good in college because that would help you get guys who are good in the NFL. Now, I say that, and because of the different things that they have done, the aggressiveness that the 49ers have demonstrated in going out and getting players, and they've got the most talented team in the NFL. And so from that perspective, I don't think that, they're not worried about any criticisms of how they're drafting. But bringing it back to Pettis here, doesn't convert the 4th down. He has 4 targets, 1 reception. There's just absolutely no talent here. I mean, you think, say, fast forward 3 years and the Chicago Bears make some draft picks. I'm guessing they already wish they had that 2nd round pick back that they traded for Chase Claypool. But you make some selections, you put some players around Justin Fields, and this offense is going to be similar to what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing. What the Philadelphia Eagles are doing is just transcendent. You look at A.J. Brown in this game, only catches 9 of the 16 targets, but he goes for 180 yards, and a lot of the other targets were deep as well. He has another very close miss. He's contorting his body on all of these plays down the sideline, wrapped up and carrying his defender. I mean, pass interference basically doesn't exist or didn't exist in week 15, and yet we still got this offensive explosion because after a year of disappointment, these guys are getting out there and making plays. Just unbelievable what Brown is doing. He makes the long catch on his 68-yard gain, then breaks free. Then he manages to not go out of bounds. And at his size, demonstrates incredible agility down the sideline. The weird thing about it was he does kind of gap his defender by 5-6 yards with only 15 yards to go to the end zone. And you're thinking 70-yard touchdown for A.J. Brown. But no, he doesn't break away. He's tackled down near the goal line. If you're also playing Jalen Hurts, the silver lining is you get another Hurts touchdown. This was kind of a dagger week for Miles Sanders managers, especially in any type of tournament where you get cut, because he has 11 carries, 42 yards, looked okay, but the Bears obviously willing to stop the running game here. He is stuffed at the goal line, and that leads to another one of these Jalen Hurts touchdowns. If you have Hurts, the fact that once they get there inside the 1 yard line, they're going to run a quarterback sneak in addition to the play that you mentioned earlier, it's just absolute nirvana for fantasy. And you kind
there's no way to stop that quarterback sneak. There is no way to stop it.
The entire Chicago Bears defensive line is lined up across the neutral zone, and the nose tackle is like making contact with the center's body as they snap it. They're called for offside, and yet still don't come anywhere close to actually stopping the play.
And then as maybe they plan, the Bears are like, well, we figured out we're going to stop it this time. We're going to stop it. And then they kind of line him up to the left-hand side, almost to the line of scrimmage, and do kind of a slant to the, or a snap to the side, and he takes on the 2-point conversion that way. So it's like, but incredible stuff from the Eagles. And you mentioned transcendent, out of the NFC, I think they are head and shoulders above anything else that's on offer in the NFC. We'll see how they do, but they certainly should be cruising towards that first round bye, and we'll see what happens then in the playoffs. But yeah, these teams heading into things from a fantasy perspective, I mentioned not getting Goddard back potentially if they want to hold him out, but I do think they're going to want to get that bye. So hopefully for everyone in the fantasy playoffs here, we get them 100% for the next couple of weeks, trying to really go all out to get that. And I think that was one of the advantages of the Vikings also winning, is it also means that there's still that need to continue to win those games. And moving on though, Shawn, to a team that has continued to win and almost didn't win this, and I see you're wearing your Kansas City Chiefs hat. They get a division championship here. I think I seen this was the 7th season in a row that they have gone on to win the division, but they get a win against the Houston Texans, who, after pressing the Cowboys last week, they really pressed the Chiefs here. This game goes to overtime. We had a couple of overtime games this week. We had a couple of games that really, Shawn, we thought were going to overtime, and we're going to get to those in a minute. But yeah, just an amazing week from that perspective. Games coming down to the wire, one-score games, and just a lot of fun from that aspect and the very final moments. Patrick Mahomes, again, over 300 yards, 336, 2 touchdowns for him. Pacheco, 86 rushing yards. We get Jerick McKinnon, though, Shawn. I don't think we can say he's taken over the backfield, but in terms of what he's actually doing from a fantasy perspective, he is dominating over the last couple of weeks. Over 30 points again in PPR formats. This week he is 52 yards on 10 carries, 1 rushing touchdown. We get a Patrick Mahomes rushing touchdown. Travis Kelce, 105 yards, 10 targets, 10 receptions. We get JuJu Smith-Schuster, 10 targets, 10 receptions, 88 yards. So highly efficient for those guys. But Jerick McKinnon, Shawn, 8 targets, 8 receptions, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. So the top 3 targets, actually, I'm looking here now. Noah Gray is the 4th target by, or 4th option by receptions and yardage here. 100% pass completion to Kelce, Schuster, McKinnon, and Gray in this game. But McKinnon, 8 for 70 and 1 through the air. On the other side, there's not a huge amount to really talk about, I don't think, from the Houston side, but they really did put up a fight here in this one. Shawn, your Kansas City Chiefs, Jerick McKinnon, can he keep up what he's doing here? It's, as when you're looking at zero RB picks at the start of the season, and particularly in these best ball formats, Jerick McKinnon could potentially be that person who has pushed the team here through these weeks to go on to win some major money.
Yeah, and he was one of our guys on the zero RB candidates list who looks like he could be the league winner, be the tournament winner. The last couple of weeks, he's been so much like what he was in the reality playoffs last season. He's such a perfect fit for what the Chiefs do, and they've been kind of looking for this back, searching for him. They're pretty happy with Pacheco brings to the table as the early down rusher. You hope that there's no point at which Clyde Edwards-Helaire would come back and take away any of the touches in this offense. One thing of note, Colm, among the running backs, Ronald Jones did lead the way in yards per carry in this one, 6 yards per carry.
Let's go, and tell us how many carries he had.
He had 1 carry after Pacheco fumbles.
Let's go.
Pacheco would have had a massive game if he doesn't fumble, because otherwise he looked good. The 15 carries to 86 yards. He also caught a pass. This is what you're expecting, but again, it's against the Houston Texans, who allow the most rushing yards per game against of any team in the NFL. This is a difficult game to explain, right? You look at the game a week ago against the Cowboys, and the Texans really held in there in most of the statistical categories. They didn't dominate that game by any stretch. They didn't win that game from a stat perspective by any stretch, but they were there. They had it. You convert that touchdown late, they're going to win that game, and arguably deservedly so. This game was really weird, and the Chiefs have had a variety of games. If you think back to the Colts loss early in the season, they've had a variety of games that they've either let be much closer than they should have been or lost because of just, it seems like a lack of intensity, a lack of concentration. It's similar to that Bengals malaise, and yet it can take place over the course of an entire game. They do go to overtime, and the Texans have the ball, only need a field goal to win the game, but it's not a particularly close game, right? They have 15 more first downs. They outgained the Texans 502 yards to 219. 280 more yards, and yet they're in overtime with a chance to lose. And you went through all the players who put up the big games for the Chiefs. They really were still firing on all cylinders offensively, but you get the Pacheco fumble. That was really costly. You have a situation where JuJu Smith-Schuster takes just a really dirty hit from the Texans, and you like for these guys to start getting kicked out of these games. Just a flagrantly dirty hit, and Smith-Schuster's had terrible concussion problems. And so the last thing you want is somebody who has that in their background, taking these dirty hits. But obviously he's taken sort of measures into his own hands before. We know that he was the guy who laid out Vontaze perfect, maybe not exactly in a position to exactly take the moral high road. He does get pretty fired up about it, though. And the next time he catches a pass, he tries to lay a hit on the defender. And maybe that's karma paying him back a little bit, because he kind of misses the defender, but takes the ball into the helmet in a way to where he actually fumbles himself. This is the first time I've ever seen for progress ruled and then overturned. The officials had another game today, another weekend worth of games that just left you scratching your head the entire way through. And the commentary too from the officiating experts, sort of bizarre. We had a play on Sunday Night Football where the Washington Commanders execute a perfect 2-point conversion and get called for offensive pass interference. This was a bizarre day today because there were a lot of 2-point conversion attempts, and almost every single one of them, the player whom the pass was intended for was like hogtied, wrestled to the ground, physically assaulted in the course of the play. And the official just looked at it like, I don't care what's going on.
Gotta let them play, Shawn.
Gotta let them play. Jahan Dotson runs a route into the end zone on this Commanders play. The defensive back wraps his arm around him, getting ready to commit a pass interference penalty, as we've seen all throughout the day. They run a receiver in behind him. He stores the 2-point conversion. Beautifully designed play. Nothing there at all except for the defender getting ready to commit another foul, and they get called for a pick. The officiating guru liked the call. Chris Collinsworth made the case that probably not a foul, and I would agree with again, so many bizarre plays. Those of us who are playing the Minnesota Vikings defense weren't happy with all the premature whistles in that one on Saturday. But again, I mean, far too many really exciting things to worry about that. But you have the 2 fumbles. You have Harrison Butker, one of the best kickers in the NFL, looking like he's still very limited. He had a disastrous game today. Both of his misses, an extra point and a 50-yarder to win the game. 2 plays which, along with the turnovers, made this game a lot closer. He shanks the extra point. He pushes the 50-yard field goal, which he has the leg from 65. So it's going to be about kicking it straight. Misses very, very badly. Field goal kicking is not easy. Definitely don't envy those players, their positions. I mean, it'd be great to be an NFL athlete, be out there. I mean, that part would be pretty awesome. It is a pressure-filled situation where you really only get picked out when you do a poor job. And these are difficult plays. You hit that ball very solid and are off just a whisker in your trajectory. You can miss it left or right. That was not the case with Butker. He missed both of these badly. So we hope that he can get on track for those of us who are playing him in fantasy and for Chiefs fans. But even though they were really pretty totally and completely mauled and controlled in this game, I think that you still have to give the Texans credit for fighting all the way through, executing the things that they could. I think you got to give Lovie Smith credit. The 2 quarterbacks who battle here. I mean, Davis Mills, another bad game, in part because he and Justin Fields don't even have backup caliber wide receivers. There is nobody on either one of these teams who should be on an NFL roster in the first place. That's not quite fair to Chris Moore, who's had some nice plays this season. 9 targets today, only the 4 catches for 42 yards. He would have been a sneaky play in DFS or other different types of tournaments. Wasn't able to come through, but Davis Mills makes some plays in this game. A cool game. And one of the things that we witnessed all the way through, and starting with the Colts building that 33-point lead. I mean, you look at that and you're thinking to yourself, I mean, you can't blow a 33-point lead. There are some coaching mistakes. I mean, it was a pure Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins fest, where in the first half, you get to see all the issues that Kirk Cousins has. In the second half, you get to see all of the issues of a geriatric Matt Ryan. And yet, one of the reasons that you never quit on these games is if the Colts can score 33 points on you in the first half, just imagine how many you could score on them. So much back and forth in these games. And Colm, that takes us to the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, this was a game, Shawn, as well, that you just mentioned there with the comebacks. This is a game where the Bengals kind of come out there. Joe Burrow comes out and he's efficient, but then they have the interception, which kind of changed the trajectory of the first half. They are 17-0 down. There's a field goal just before halftime, but where this game really changed is the second quarter. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers look really good on offense. And that first half, as I mentioned, putting up those 17 points, but things really did slow down for them. Just the 6 points in the second half coming their way. They lose 34-23. And that led to, I believe, 34 unanswered points in this game. So it's 17-0, then it goes to 34-17, and then it finishes off, as I mentioned there, 34-23. Obviously, one of the teams, Shawn, in the NFC South is going to get into the playoffs. So even with this loss, the Buccaneers are still kind of having that opportunity, but they are 6-8 on the season. The Bengals now 10-4. The Bengals are that little bit of a, you don't really know what you're going to get from them, but the comebacks and the spectacular NFL kind of storylines, some people might say scripts, but storylines are interesting here with them getting this win. Not a huge day for Burrow. He does just have the 200 yards passing, but if you get 4 passing touchdowns, Shawn, with 200 yards passing, I think that's going to lead to a pretty good day overall. Nothing really on the ground. A combined 21 rush attempts for the Bengals here, just a 53 yards. But Ja'Marr Chase gets a touchdown. Tyler Boyd gets a touchdown. That's 7 for 60 and 1 off 13 targets. Shawn, you mentioned some of the pass interference or non-calls. Ja'Marr Chase was furious a number of times in this game because he was just getting wrestled each time he went to make a reception. He did start to get some calls in that second half. Tyler Boyd came in with a finger injury, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 35 yards, 1 touchdown. T. Higgins gets in the end zone as well. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 33 yards, and 1 touchdown. I felt that there was a lot left on the table as well today from the Bengals passing perspective, but they get the job done in this one. Tom Brady, 44 pass attempts, 30 completions, 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Got really messy, bad interception early in that second half that led to points again. And the other thing that the Bengals were really good at in this game is when they got those opportunities from the turnovers, they did really punish the Buccaneers. Again, another side of the game where there wasn't much happening in the running game. 25 attempts, 92 yards for the Bengals, or for the Bucs as a whole. Godwin, though, 8 targets, 8 receptions, 83 yards, 1 touchdown. We get Russell Gage, the other big kind of scorer today, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns for him. What are some of the takeaways, Shawn, that you have from this game?
Well, if you have a best ball team that you got through to the playoffs with Russell Gage, then you were rewarded with a massive game today. He leads the team with the 12 targets, gets 2 of the 3 touchdowns. You mentioned Tom Brady and some of the mistakes. The second interception on the Bengals' part was a fantastic catch there. But he goes for 312. The telecast claimed this is the first time the Bengals have given up 300 passing yards this year. The Bengals haven't been a big play defense, but they do not let you move the ball. We saw that on the ground today where Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White more or less stopped ahead White in some places where it would have been great if he could have done more. But we're still not really seeing it from him, unfortunately. This is a battle of 2 good defenses and 2, sort of statuesque quarterbacks, and that gave each team some trouble for a while. You mentioned all of those pass interferences on Ja'Marr Chase that weren't called. I mean, he's in a wrestling match every single play. If you're going to let defenses do that again, I mean, they've got such a big advantage. I don't think that that's the way that we want these plays called in an NFL that is struggling for points. But he still manages to draw 13 targets. You mentioned the 760 and 1. He also failed to make 3 catches that he's not going to make every time because they're difficult plays, but very makeable plays that would have added big chunks onto his score. I mean, this is a bad game for Ja'Marr Chase in which he puts up 19 fantasy points. Yeah, maybe this is just the enthusiasm I'm feeling for the day and definitely the exuberance I have for the player, but I don't think it's impossible that we get a 25 point per game season, maybe a 26, 27 point per game season from Ja'Marr Chase sometime in the next 6 or 7 years. He doesn't have quite the size of a Justin Jefferson. He obviously doesn't have the size of a Calvin Johnson. But when you're thinking about players like Jefferson who are going to be in that mix, and especially now that we have an extra game, are you going to see a 2,000-yard season from Chase, a 2,000-yard season from Jefferson? I mean, those years are coming. Again, a bad game today in terms of the interferences, in terms of Burrow's ability to deal with the rush early and move the ball. I mean, they don't move the ball at all until the last couple seconds of the first half. He drops some passes, and you have this 19-point game. So we're talking about just the sky is the absolute limit. That's not, any type of bold prediction or controversial note. It's just amazement at how good he is and what this team has in the future. One of the things we've really been looking for is a game where all three receivers get involved, and because all three are involved, it allows the team to win. That was the game today. All three guys here were necessary. All three of them show up in the second half. It's great to see Tyler Boyd more or less healthy after the finger injury, and for T. Higgins to play through a game here with the different soft tissue injuries. Just a huge sigh of relief for everyone who had Jalen Waddle, for everyone who has T. Higgins. They look like two of the 7 or 8 best receivers in the NFL, and unfortunately, injuries have kept them just that tiny notch down from being the true league winners like we've had from those guys in the first and second rounds in terms of where they went in fantasy drafts. The big years are coming for those two players as well. It'll be interesting to see where they actually go in 2023. Back half of the second round does seem in play for both of them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be... You have me enthused by the comment about the potential points per game, but yeah, both the wide receivers look just at the next level. The things that they can do are things that not many athletes in the world can do. Never mind players playing in the NFL. So excited to see it. They're also paired obviously with Joe Burrow, which is a fantastic help from that perspective. Shawn, we're going to jump into the win bet. Wow, what have I just seen play off the day? This may be I haven't done this segment before called the wow play of the day, but this is something that I don't think I've ever seen before, and I don't know if I'll ever see it again. And that is the ending to the New England Patriots and the Las Vegas Raiders game, where the Raiders come out 30-24 winners in this one. But you can sign up to WinBet today to receive a special sports offer. Bet $100 to win $100. Download the WinBet app now or visit wynnbet.com to start winning. Shawn, Mac Jones 112 passing yards, so we don't get really anything through the air here in this game for the Patriots. Rhamondre Stevenson is the story again. Rhamondre Stevenson looks fantastic. Come into this game with questionable tag. How efficient would he be? He has 19 carries, Shawn, for 172 yards and 1 touchdown, averaging 9.1 yards a carry. He has impressed me no end this season. Just keeps doing stuff. I made a prediction. It didn't obviously happen in this game, and it probably won't happen before the end of the season because it was a pretty bold prediction. That was that Rhamondre Stevenson would have a 40-point game before the end of the season. But in terms of rushing the ball, he looked amazing here. Just 2 receptions off 3 targets for him, but it was for -4 yards. On the other side, the big talking point is obviously going to be Davante Adams, 9 targets, 4 receptions, 28 yards. So people who got to the playoffs with Adams and his strong performances, this was, you mentioned earlier, the dagger performance for Miles Sanders. This one, it'll be interesting to see in those best ball tournaments how many Davante Adams teams actually advance to the next round. And if you get one through, that could be a major edge to finish this off. Not a big day for Josh Jacobs either, 93 rushing yards, just 17 receiving yards on 2 passing or 2 receptions. But Derek Carr struggled a bit in this game, but does get 3 touchdowns. One of those going to Darren Waller, who was back in the mix here. The other touchdown, Shawn, went to Keelan Cole, which we want to see points stand. We want to see touchdowns scored. It was interesting that they really only seemed to have one camera angle that they could work off here. This was reviewed, I believe, at the time as well, challenged by the Patriots, but it looked like his toe was out of bounds, but wasn't clear and definitive. I think this is one, if it's called as not a catch, it is not overturned. It's one of those ones where it's right on the borderline, but I was surprised that it was upheld. But Shawn, that is not the play I'm talking about, but that was a 30-yard touchdown to kind of set things up here. We get a situation at the end where Rhamondre Stevenson breaks off a run. Time has basically hit zeros. He tosses it off to Jakobi Meyers, who this game's going to overtime. It's not a case you have to score now. Jakobi Meyers tries to throw this one back to Mac Jones. It is intercepted, and it is returned for a touchdown to seal the game here as a walk-off interception on a lateral. I don't know what way. I think it's actually ruled as a fumble. It is ruled as a fumble to Jakobi Meyers, but Chandler Jones bulldozes over Mac Jones and takes it to the house. Is this one of the craziest plays you've ever seen in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, this play will go down in history with the Stanford band play. It seems like this kind of the flip side of that.
I would imagine that there's a lot of like Raiders fans here who like see this game as heading to overtime. They're kind of happy about that based on how the game was going. They head out to the concessions or head to the bathroom, to get ready for overtime. And I'm sure that there is a portion of that stadium who's missed this play.
It was the wrong play to miss. But you like the effort there from Myers fighting for it. It just very ill-advised. And I mean, this was a very strange game from the beginning. You get the pick six when the Raiders are completely dominating the game. You have a game here where the Raiders are able to come back, even though, I mean, this is a New England defense, a New England game plan. So you know that they're going to take out the stars. So they take out Davante Adams. They take out Josh Jacobs. I mean, Jacobs still goes for 93, but when you have the 22 carries, that's not really helping the team from an efficiency perspective that moves the chains, gets the team in scoring types of positions. You mentioned that it was a dagger performance from Adams, not a killer from Jacobs, but if he was the guy who carried you to the playoffs, then he didn't carry you today. Scored about the same number of points that you're going to get from Jerry Jeudy in one of the ugliest NFL games we've ever seen. So that's not kind of the level that you were hoping for today. Now, there was a long play early where if Davante Adams hauls that in, it's a little bit different day for him. I think a beautifully thrown pass. He usually makes that, not an easy catch at all, but we're so used to seeing him make the highlight look routine. He wasn't able to do it today. You have the play in the end zone there. That's one where you have to have more angles. I don't understand. It's a little bit like having officials who aren't full-time, although that's a little bit of a misleading type of deal. But to not have the camera angle there, because you actually can't overturn that play, I don't think. The angle that you get is so terrible that even though it does look like his toe is on the line there, because of perspective, that's going to be misleading. The official's right there looking at it from his angle, sees it as a touchdown. You don't have any of the angles that would show you that he clearly stepped on the line based on what the rules are. I mean, you've got to kind of let that play stand.
My question is, we had the Jaguars game last week where there's a fantastic camera angle of Zay Jones' toe. It shows it clearly inbounds. We're playing this game in one of the newest stadiums in the NFL. Costs probably close to maybe billions of pounds, or going over that, or billions of dollars, and the one view we have seems to be from like the top of the upright. Can we not get a second camera in here?
Yeah, so that part was unfortunate because I don't know. I was rooting for the Raiders here. I was rooting for Derek Carr for fantasy. I was excited about the play. I'm not unbiased. I won't pretend to be, but I do think that we want the scoring, and based on the rules, you've got to hold that play up. It is unfortunate for the Patriots, who appear to have this game won, and then they have that play late. You have to mention Mac Jones. He goes 13 for 31 for only 112 yards. I actually didn't think he threw the ball that poorly in this game. A lot of drops by the receivers. The Myers play at the end, not the first really bad play by his teammates that don't allow him to move the ball. You have a situation at the end of the first half where the play calling is late constantly. They are not able to run the plays that they want. They end up settling for a field goal. And this was one of the first games today where I thought that the Patriots offensive coaching was so egregiously bad that the issues that were talked about all offseason and all preseason just so glaring. And so from that perspective, you wonder what they'll do in the offseason, because now they're going to be faced with that. Their playoff odds plummet with the loss here. They've got several more difficult games to go. You've got a fantastic defense. You've got some young potential stars. You have a Rhamondre Stevenson. You look at what's happening with the Jacksonville Jaguars and how just in the last month, Trevor Lawrence has taken this leap from possible bust, blows right past competent, to now looking like an absolute superstar. One of the things that the Jets were dealing with today as well is that they don't want to give up too early. You think about Justin Fields and how he looked last season, how he looked in the first month, and then what he's been able to do since. These teams know that they can't give up on their players when they've invested what they've invested in them, and when starting over has such high costs in its own way. And yet what we're seeing here with the Patriots is not giving Mac Jones a chance. On the one hand, I think you have to like his competitiveness and the frustration that he was demonstrating. On the other hand, the Patriots probably are not going to put up with that, number one. And then just number two, it really does give you a sense of the dysfunction. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders actually a much better team than their record indicates. This would have been an excellent win for the Patriots. It's not a terrible loss from the perspective of who you played and that element of it, but you have to win this game. They had a couple of different things that they could have done outside of that last play that would have let them cement the victory.
Shawn, next game, maybe a quick recap. It's the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos. We get Arizona losing out on this one, 24-15. The Denver Broncos getting the win. Both teams now 4-10 on the season. You mentioned earlier that you thought both coaching staffs may be out of jobs at halftime. Still feels like both of these coaching staffs could be out of these roles at the end of the season. It's just been a terrible season for both based on where we thought they would be at this point. But the Cardinals have a couple of those back-to-back, obviously first-year head coach in Denver, so we'll see what happens there. But Arizona in big trouble here. We do get Colt McCoy with a concussion. He leaves the game. Trance McSorley comes in for him. Really struggled to get anything going from both of those guys. We get a Trey McBride site, and he gets 4 receptions for 55 yards. We haven't got a huge amount for him throughout the season. Maybe the backup quarterback's been in there, maybe beneficial to him. 7 for 60 for DeAndre Hopkins. James Conner gets in the end zone with 63 rushing yards from him, 3 receptions and 28 yards to add to that. Jerry Jeudy, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 76 yards with Brett Rippon at quarterback, 197 yards passing for him. Shawn, the running backs kind of got the job over the line here with Latavius Murray, 24 carries, 130 yards, 1 touchdown. He has done quite well since he has come in and kind of been the starter on the offense here. Has continued to put up some points for them in a season where not a huge amount of bright spots in Denver. Marlon Mack gets into the end zone again with a rushing touchdown here, 5 for 37, 1 touchdown for him. But again, probably not affecting many lineups this particular week. And then we also get Eric Tomlinson getting the other touchdown here for the Broncos. Any thoughts on this? Any key things to take away? Another one where we mentioned potential players maybe not advancing in some of these contests. DeAndre Hopkins maybe in that bracket as well.
Yeah, Hopkins looked like he was going to be a guy who, if you had the guts to take those first 6 weeks, that he was going to be a difference maker down the stretch. That has evaporated with the injury to Kyler Murray. Even worse is Marquise Brown. You think of all of these teams that traded for star wide receivers in the offseason. You think about what the Cardinals paid for Brown and what he's given them. Got off to a decent start. Had a lot of very solid to even big games in that first initial stretch before things really went fully pear-shaped for the Cardinals. But since DeAndre Hopkins has been there, there's been no complementary element for Marquise Brown. They don't work well together. You're going to have Rondale Moore at some point. Despite the extensions signed, you kind of expect that this will be all new next offseason. And a Hopkins, Brown, Rondale Moore team should be extremely dynamic. The news, it sounded like on the Kyler Murray surgery, was very positive to where he could be back to start next season. I think if you're a Cardinals fan, you have to be excited about that. And then you have to be excited about the fact that McBride looked fantastic in this game. Just the 5 targets, but he is a big dude who's fast. I mean, that was one of the things that came out of this offseason, and the reason that they took him where they did is that to have a tight end with that much production in college, even if it's a small school level, and then for him to be that athletic, that's a potential difference maker for you. You always got to keep a little bit kind of in check in terms of thinking what the upside could eventually be there. You're going to want to see it. But if you can go out and trade for him as a throw-in piece this offseason, I think that some fantasy managers will be frustrated enough about what he did through the first 10, 11, 12 weeks that they might still be willing to include him, especially because some of this breakout is going to be covered up by the incompetence of the Cardinals and the quarterback play that you're having to deal with here. He's someone, especially when thinking about the trajectory for a lot of the tight ends and when you're expecting them to really hit, I'll be trying to add as many shares of McBride as you can this offseason. Again, I say that as someone who is loaded up to start with, so it's not coming to you from the perspective of being surprised by it or changing the opinion. You might weigh that a little bit, but definitely doubling down on McBride is the guy that you want to have here. Unfortunately, a contrast to Greg Dulcich on the other side, who's been one of the few bright spots for the Broncos. He was not a part of this passing game with Brett Rippon under center. If you were playing him, and I was playing with both Ben and with Patrick Carrain in RV Triflex quarterfinals this weekend, to have Eric Tomlinson and guys like that as the focal point. Tomlinson does get in on a touchdown there. That part a little bit disappointing. Jerry Jeudy 7 for 76. Within the context of this particular game, it was an not explosive. He averages just under 11 yards per reception, but the routes again today, and this is something that even as he's struggled to both stay healthy and to deal with the excruciatingly poor quarterback play during the course of his first 3 seasons in the NFL, people rave and rave and rave. I think when the quarterback play is as bad as it's been, it can be hard to see that manifest itself in a game in a way that really matters to you as a fantasy manager or even just as a fan. You're thinking, I mean, it's fine, but it's irrelevant. In today's game, his ability to go out there and separate and get so wide open that Rippon could find him when he needed him, it jumped out to me. And so that part was kind of cool. I think that Jeudy is someone where the injuries really bother me, really worry me. The future quarterback play, I mean, Russell Wilson is locked into being the guy for this team for a long time. He's not going to be awesome unless something really changes. And yet they're going to have new coaches. They're going to have a new offensive scheme. Hopefully it's something that fits a little bit better. And it's just like actually NFL level, like borderline competent. One of the things that we've witnessed this season is just the stark contrast between what Doug Peterson brings to the table and what the Jaguars were dealing with last year. I think that the situation in Denver is as bad or worse than what the Jacksonville Jaguars were dealing with last year. Urban Meyer, obviously overmatched, obviously someone with a lot of these sort of Napoleon issues and what have you. But in terms of actual coaching acumen, I think the Denver Broncos are dealing with an even worse staff here. Jeudy, someone that you probably should be buying if you can get through those injuries. You look at what he's doing. You look at what Davonta Smith did today. He was someone, especially early, where as the Bears are trying to take A.J. Brown away, and that seems strange to say when you look at the final line, but they were definitely doing that. Davonta Smith was shredding them. He was so dynamic, so wide open, showing off so much speed, so much ability after the catch that they had to change their game plan. A.J. Brown gets a lot of these one-on-ones. A.J. Brown actually making the contested catches today, not necessarily separating, but using that size. Smith separating. You think about Smith, you think about Jalen Waddle, who demonstrated that he can still get it done with his long score. Jerry Jeudy, obviously right there or better than those guys in college. We saw some elements of it today. Probably isn't super important to you these last couple of weeks with this environment, but he's someone where add him. And when you look ahead to 2023 and early drafts, some of which are already taking place, draft him.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a few times that I'm feeling this excitement already to start drafting for 2023. So we'll see how long we wait before we start jumping into those. But Shawn, The last game we're going to talk about today, we will be back on the Tuesday show to recap the rest of the games here. Hopefully, for me, a Green Bay Packers win, but a team in the division, the Detroit Lions, get another win, 20-17 against the New York Jets. This looked like a game that was destined for overtime, but the Lions get it done late here, and then the Jets couldn't respond at that point. They are now 7-7 on the season. Incredible story as to how they have got to this point, but this wasn't kind of the game that we've come to expect with the Lions, where we get a high-scoring shootout. The Jets really didn't have enough to put them in a hole, against the Lions defense to make them continue to try and put up those numbers. So it was a little bit of a closer game. The only real note here for me, Shawn, is Garrett Wilson got it done, and a lot of it came late on. He gets 4 for 98 off 9 targets. You mentioned Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson has some nice throws in this game, has some very bad throws in this game. So we kind of got a mix of what we thought Zach Wilson would do. But I have to say, he did have 317 passing yards in this one, but it is 18 off 35. So very inefficient in it. Takes 4 sacks for 30 yards. And just now, when I mentioned sacks for 30 yards, Joe Burrow today got very, very lucky with a defensive holding call. We were talking about the holding calls. There was a hold on Jamar Chase, which meant that ruled out, I believe it was going to be a 26-yard sack that took them into their own half, which was a absolute, I'm sure he is very thankful for that call come the end of the game. But yeah, a weird decision there by Burrow to head towards his own goal at a high rate. But on the Lions side, we get just the 252 passing yards from Goff, 1 touchdown for him. Swift gets a little bit going on the ground, just the 52 yards for him. Jamal Williams, just the 33 yards rushing for him. We are seeing Justin Jackson sprinkled in a bit more, 6 rush attempts for him. And then we get nothing major, I guess, from anybody through the air for the Lions. So I don't have any major takeaways from this game for fantasy moving forward, other than Garrett Wilson continues to look good, but he's going to have a little bit of trouble here if we have Zach Wilson for the rest of the season. What did you make of the Lions and the Jets?
This was another one where you can understand the frustration, and yet you probably just need to rein it in a little bit more. Wilson left the field fuming on multiple occasions, just really showing up his quarterback. Now, I think you have to question what the Jets are doing here, because if they win this game, and the New York Jets had the best defense in the NFL. What they did to the Lions today was extraordinary, completely shutting them down, and the Lions have been hot. And the Lions it's not a fluke. They've been hot for too long, an entire season basically, except for that time period when Amon-Ra St. Brown was out. And they made them look awful in this game today. You think a little bit about the defense that's being played in that AFC East alongside some of the offensive fireworks. The other game where Detroit really struggled this season was against that New England Patriots defense. Huge contrast, Patriots offensive and defensive sides of the ball. But in this game here, I think you have to like the competitiveness on both sides. You have to love both coaching staffs. And Jared Goff, on the one hand, demonstrated why he's probably still not the future in Detroit. And on the other, he leads them to a win against a team that is the caliber of the defense is just almost impossible to overstate here. The play that really jumps out when you think about why they might want somebody else, if you, again, it's going to be best ball because you don't have Jameson Williams starting for you in a managed league, but he gets just the one target, but it is a target where he's behind the defense for what I believe would have been about a 50-yard touchdown. And he's behind the defense by 5-6 yards. Goff underthrows it to the point where the defender coming back and closing fast is able to get his hands there. That gives you a little bit of sense, too, of what the Lions are going to have a month from now in the actual playoffs as they bring Jameson Williams along, because his speed is unique. You put that with Amon-Ra's ability underneath and that lateral agility, this team is going to be almost impossible to deal with. DeAndre Swift had the 9 targets in this game, only catches the 5 passes, but you look at his contribution, too, and the playmakers that they have. I know that the Lions want Jamal Williams to be a thing. They want him to be the short yardage back. He does actually have a touchdown in this game. That was a pretty nice run, but is called back on a holding penalty. So if you add that to his score, then it's not as bad of a week. But you put the Williams and Justin Jackson carries together, 19 carries, 49 yards. all of those plays are making it more difficult for this team to sustain drives. The contrast between those players and Swift is still not a guy that you probably, even fully healthy, want to have some kind of massive workload. He's not going to be a Derrick Henry or anything like that. And yet a few more of the other plays need to be removed and given to him, or simply need to be passing plays, even handoffs to the receiver. Amon-Ra does get one such carry in this game because those plays are hurting Detroit, and they hurt them in games that are competitive. It's obviously less of a problem in games that are blowouts. Now, they get the kind of not exactly blown coverage, but Brock Wright drops a key pass late, comes back, scores on a 51-yard sort of catch and rumble play. A real eyesore in comparison to everything else that the Jets did today. So they win the game late on that when it looked like Wilson, in fact, was going to lead them back. I mean, he averages 9 yards per catch, in part because Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore are bringing so much dynamism to the field. Wilson catches less than half of his targets today and still ends up with 98 yards. Once they have the QB in place there, I mean, you're already talking about 200-yard games with some frequency. Now, some frequency, it doesn't mean obviously every week, but just, again, in terms of the enthusiasm for the day-to-day, it looked like he was going to get shut down at halftime, and that if you played him knowing that he's this big-time playmaker, even with Zach Wilson, you got to put some of those guys out there, but you're staring at maybe a 3, 4, 5, something to that effect. He comes back late and makes these big plays. The competitiveness from Wilson you want to see, even though the accuracy and the decision-making more or less completely absent. But this is a heartbreaking loss for the Jets, who looked like they had it with about a minute to go.
Yeah, it felt that way. So interesting finish to the game, and Garrett Wilson being a big part of trying to make that comeback, but didn't get there in the end. We will talk about the rest of the games on the Tuesday show, but Shawn, it is the week of the holidays here, and I know a lot of people will be getting ready to travel potentially and things like that. So we will be recording lots of content over the next couple of weeks to keep you going. But if you have any questions, we love getting those topics, those ideas in from the RotoViz Overtime community. So do send them, whether you're watching this on YouTube or whether you're listening to it on the podcast form. Send them my way on Twitter at Overtime Ireland, or you can add it as a YouTube comment if you're watching over on that side. We might get some of those shows posted over the next couple of weeks. But we're always looking for those topic ideas as we get into the NFL offseason from a fantasy football perspective. Shawn, the other thing to mention is 25% discounts for 1 month passes at rotoviz.com are still something that are available. If somebody is interested, if you want to buy one for somebody else, you want to get one for yourself, all you have to do is add the code RVRadio2022 at checkout at rotoviz.com. Save yourself 25% off that 1 month pass. I think that, you jump in, you'll love it. You'll want to be ready for the 2023 season. You'll be there. And Shawn often mentions about losing time in the tools. Definitely, hopefully you're gonna have some, vacation time, some holiday time over the next couple of weeks. Perfect time to sit and relax. Maybe you're sitting in an airport, even better. Get yourself into the RotoViz tools and have a look through it. But that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully your week 15 is going well, going according to plan with your fantasy football teams. We still have Monday Night Football to go, so we will be back after that is concluded. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. My co-host is Shawn Siegele. Check out all of Shawn's work up on rotoviz.com. And until we are back, have a good one.